Have you ever felt like you're just an ordinary person, caught up in circumstances far beyond your control? What if I told you that one of the most incredible stories of courage and destiny is about a young woman who felt just that way? This is the story of an orphan girl who became a queen and saved her entire nation from annihilation. This is the story of Esther. Our story begins in the ancient Persian Empire, a vast kingdom stretching from India to Ethiopia. Ruled by the powerful king Ahasuerus, also known as Xerxes. The king, known for his lavish displays of wealth, threw a magnificent 180-day festival for his nobles and officials. At the climax of this celebration, he hosted a 7-day banquet for all the people in his capital city of Susa. On the final day, feeling merry, the king commanded his queen, Vashti, to appear before his guests to show off her beauty. But Queen Vashti refused. Publicly defied, the king was furious. His advisors, fearing that Vashti's rebellion would inspire other women in the empire to disobey their husbands, urged the king to depose her and find a new queen. And so, a royal decree was sent out. A search for the most beautiful young virgins in the land. One of them would become the new queen of Persia.
Yes.
This is where we meet Hadassah, a young Jewish orphan living in Susa. Her parents had died, and she was raised by her older cousin, Mordecai, who loved her as his own daughter. Hadassah was exceptionally beautiful, and when the king's decree was announced, she was taken, along with many other young women, to the king's palace. On Mordecai's wise counsel, she concealed her Jewish identity and went by her Persian name, Esther. In the palace, the women underwent a year of extensive beauty treatments. Esther, with her grace and humility, quickly won the favor of Hegai, the eunuch in charge of the harem. He gave her the best living quarters, special food, and 7 maids. Throughout this time, Mordecai would walk by the courtyard of the harem every day to check on her welfare. When the time came for each woman to go before the king, she could take anything she desired from the harem with her. But when Esther's turn came, she requested nothing more than what Hegai advised. Her modesty and natural charm were enough. When King Ahasuerus saw Esther, he was captivated. He loved her more than all the other women, and he placed the royal crown on her head, making her his queen. He then threw a great banquet in her honor, the Feast of Esther. Meanwhile, Mordecai, who held a minor position at the king's gate, remained ever watchful. One day he overheard 2 of the king's chamberlains plotting to assassinate King Ahasuerus. Mordecai immediately told Queen Esther, who then informed the king, giving full credit to Mordecai. The plot was investigated, the 2 men were executed, and Mordecai's deed was recorded in the official chronicles of the kingdom. It seemed like a small event at the time, but this act of loyalty would prove to be monumentally important.
Ow.
A new character enters our story, Haman the Agagite. The king promoted Haman to be his prime minister, making him the 2nd most powerful man in the empire. The king commanded that everyone bow down to Haman as he passed. But Mordecai, as a devout Jew, refused to bow to any man, reserving that honor for God alone. When Haman learned of Mordecai's defiance, and that he was a Jew, he was filled with rage. But his anger wasn't just for Mordecai. He wanted to destroy all the Jews throughout the entire Persian Empire. Haman went to the king, poisoning his mind with lies, claimed there was a certain people scattered throughout the kingdom whose laws were different from all other people and who did not obey the king's laws. He argued that it was not in the king's interest to tolerate them. He then offered the king a massive bribe, 10,000 talents of silver, to issue a decree for their complete destruction. The king, perhaps carelessly, gave Haman his signet ring, granting him the authority to do as he pleased. Haman wasted no time. He had lots cast a pur in Persian, which is where the festival of Purim gets its name, to determine the most auspicious day for the massacre. The day chosen was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A decree was written, sealed with the king's ring, and sent by couriers to every province, ordering the people to destroy, kill, and annihilate all Jews, young and old, women and children, that single day, and to plunder their possessions. When the decree was announced, the city of Susa was thrown into confusion. For the Jewish people, it was a death sentence. Mordecai tore his clothes, put on sackcloth and ashes, and went through the city wailing loudly. When Esther's maids told her about Mordecai, she was deeply distressed. She sent clothes for him, but he refused them. She then sent one of her trusted attendants to find out what was wrong. Mordecai explained everything and gave him a copy of the decree to show Esther. He charged her with a critical mission: to go before the king, plead for her people, and beg for their lives. This was a terrifying request. Anyone who approached the king in the inner court without being summoned would be put to death unless the king extended his golden scepter. Esther had not been called to see the king for 30 days. She was afraid. She sent a message back to Mordecai, explaining the danger. But Mordecai's reply was a turning point, not just for Esther, but for history. He sent back a message that rings through the ages. Do not think that because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place. But you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Those words struck Esther's heart. She realized her destiny was not just to be a queen, but to be a savior. She found her courage. She sent her final reply to Mordecai: Go, gather together all the Jews who are in Susa, and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days, night or day. I and my attendants will fast as you do. When this is done, I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. If I perish, I perish. After 3 days of fasting and prayer, Esther put on her royal robes and stood in the inner court of the king's palace. When the king saw her, she won his favor. He extended the golden scepter toward her. What is it, Queen Esther? He asked. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be given you. But Esther didn't reveal her plan just yet. Instead, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet she had prepared. At the banquet, the king again asked for her request. Again, she deflected, inviting them both to a second banquet the next day, promising she would finally reveal her petition then. Haman left the first banquet feeling joyful and proud. But on his way out, he saw Mordecai at the king's gate, still refusing to bow. His good mood vanished, replaced by fury. He went home and complained to his wife and friends. They gave him a wicked suggestion: build a gallows 75 feet high, and in the morning ask the king for permission to hang Mordecai on it. Haman loved the idea and had the gallows built immediately. That very night, a twist of fate occurred. The king couldn't sleep. He asked for the book of the Chronicles, the official records of his reign, to be read to him. As they were read, he was reminded of the time Mordecai had saved his life by exposing the assassination plot. What honor or recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendants replied. Just then, Haman entered the outer court, ready to ask the king to hang Mordecai. The king saw him and asked, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman, in his arrogance, thought the king could only be talking about him. So he described a lavish ceremony: dress the man in the king's own royal robes, place him on the king's own horse, and have a high-ranking noble lead him through the city streets, proclaiming, "This is what is done for the man the king delights to honor." The king loved the idea. So at once he commanded a stunned Haman, "Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew, who sits at the king's gate. Do not neglect a single detail." Haman had no choice but to obey. He had to publicly honor the very man he planned to execute. Humiliated, he rushed home in despair. The time for Esther's second banquet arrived. The king and Haman came, and for the third time, the king asked, "What is your petition, Queen Esther?" "It will be given you." "What is your request?" "Even up to half the kingdom, it will be fulfilled." This time, Esther was ready. She took a deep breath and said, "If I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated." The king was shocked. Who is he? Where is the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther looked directly at Haman and declared, "An adversary, an enemy." This wicked Haman, fear gripped Haman. The king, enraged, stormed out into the palace garden. Haman, realizing his life was over, fell on the couch where Esther was reclining, begging for his life. At that moment, the king returned. Seeing Haman on the couch with the queen, he misinterpreted the scene and became even more furious. As the king spoke, his attendants covered Haman's face, a sign of his condemnation. Then one of the eunuchs pointed out, "A gallows 75 feet high stands by Haman's house." He had it made for Mordecai, the man who spoke up to help the king. The king's command was swift and final: hang him on it. So Haman was executed on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. But the danger was not over. The evil decree to kill the Jews was still in effect, and a law of the Medes and Persians could not be repealed. So the king gave Esther and Mordecai his signet ring, and told them to write a new decree in the king's name. The new edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy any armed force that might attack them and their families, and to plunder the property of their enemies. This new decree was rushed by couriers on the fastest horses to all 127 provinces. When the 13th day of Adar arrived, the day originally planned for their destruction, the Jews instead turned the tables on their enemies. Throughout the empire, they defended themselves and were victorious. In Susa, they fought for 2 days. In the end, the threat was eliminated. To celebrate this miraculous deliverance, Mordecai established an annual festival, the Festival of Purim, time of feasting, joy, and giving gifts to one another and to the poor. And so, the orphan girl, Esther, through her courage and faith, saved her people. Mordecai became the new prime minister, second in command to the king, and he worked for the good of his people. The story of Esther is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most ordinary people are called to do extraordinary things. A story that asks each of us, what if you were put in your position right here, right now, for such a time as this? Meanwhile, in the capital city of Susa, Mordecai went about his quiet life near the king's gate. One day, while sitting there, he overheard 2 palace guards secretly plotting to assassinate King Xerxes. Recognizing the danger, Mordecai immediately sent word to his cousin, Queen Esther. Esther, in turn, reported the conspiracy to the king, making sure to give full credit to Mordecai. An investigation was launched, the guards were found guilty, and they were executed. The king's life was saved, and Mordecai's heroic act was officially recorded in the royal chronicles. But strangely, he received no reward. His name was simply written in a book, and the moment passed, or so it seemed. Soon after, a man named Haman rose through the ranks to become the most powerful official in the empire, second only to the king. The king commanded that everyone bow before Haman as a sign of respect. And everywhere he went, people fell to their knees. All except for one man, Mordecai. Day after day, Haman noticed Mordecai's refusal to bow. When Haman discovered that Mordecai was a Jew, his personal anger turned into a venomous hatred for an entire people. He decided that punishing Mordecai alone wasn't enough. He wanted to destroy all Jews. So Haman devised a wicked plan. Cast lots known as Purim to select a day for their complete annihilation. Then he went to the king with deceitful words. "There is a certain people scattered throughout your empire," he said. "They follow their own laws and do not obey your commands. It is not in your best interest to tolerate them." Without investigating the matter, King Xerxes handed Haman his signet ring, granting him the authority to act. A decree was written and sent to every corner of the empire on a specific day. Every Jewish person, young and old, women and children, was to be killed. When the decree was announced, panic and despair erupted. Across the empire, Jews mourned, tearing their clothes, fasting and weeping in the streets. When Mordecai heard the news, he covered himself in sackcloth and ashes, a symbol of deep grief. Esther, safe within the palace walls, learned of his distress and sent a messenger to find out what was wrong. Mordecai sent back the terrifying truth and urged her to do something incredibly dangerous. She had to go before the king and plead for her people. But Esther knew the law. Anyone who approached the king in his inner court without being summoned faced an automatic death sentence, unless the king extended his golden scepter. And Esther hadn't been called to see the king for 30 days. Fear gripped her heart. But Mordecai sent back a message that would change everything. Do not think that. Because you are in the king's house, you alone of all the Jews will escape. If you remain silent at this time, deliverance for the Jews will arise from another place, but you and your father's family will perish. And who knows but that you have come to your royal position for such a time as this? Those words pierced Esther's heart. Her fear slowly transformed into resolute courage. She sent her answer back to Mordecai. Gather all the Jews in Susa and fast for me. Do not eat or drink for 3 days.
Not my attendants, and I will do the same.
Then I will go to the king, even though it is against the law. And if I perish, I perish." 3 days later, Esther, dressed in her finest royal robes and with trembling courage, stepped into the king's inner court. The room fell silent. Everyone held their breath. The king looked up from his throne. For a heart-stopping moment, everything hung in the balance. Then slowly, Xerxes extended the golden scepter toward her. Esther stepped forward and touched its tip. Her life was spared. "What is it, Queen Esther?" the king asked warmly. "What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted to you." But Esther surprised him. Instead of making her plea, she invited the king and Haman to a banquet. And at that banquet, she invited them to another one the next day. The tension continued to build. That night, the king couldn't sleep. He ordered the royal chronicles to be read aloud to him. And as the scribe read, the forgotten story of Mordecai's, a man who had saved the king's life yet had never been rewarded, came to light. At that very moment, Haman arrived at the palace, seeking permission to hang Mordecai on the gallows he had just built. But before Haman could speak, the king asked him, what should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Haman, assuming the honor was for himself, described an extravagant public parade. "Excellent," the king said. "Go at once and do just as you have suggested for Mordecai the Jew." Haman was forced to lead his mortal enemy. Through the streets proclaiming his honor, his pride was shattered. His downfall had begun. At the second banquet, Esther finally revealed the truth. "If I have found favor with you, your majesty," she said, "grant me my life, this is my petition. And spare my people, this is my request." The king was shocked. What is he? Where is he, the man who has dared to do such a thing? Esther pointed directly at Haman. The adversary and enemy is this vile Haman. The king's fury exploded. Moments later, Haman was executed on the very gallows he had built for Mordecai. The great reversal was underway. The king gave Haman's estate to Esther, and Mordecai was promoted, receiving the king's signet ring. But the original decree against the Jews could not be revoked. So, a new decree was issued, granting the Jews the right to defend themselves. When the appointed day arrived, what was meant to be a day of destruction became a day of victory. The Jewish people established a yearly celebration called Purim, a reminder that even in the face of overwhelming evil, hope can prevail. What's fascinating is that the book of Esther never directly mentions God, yet his guiding hand is visible everywhere in every coincidence, every dramatic reversal, and every act of courage. It shows that when an enemy plots destruction, a higher plan for salvation may already be in motion. The orphan girl from exile became the queen who saved a nation. And her story leaves us with a powerful question. Perhaps you have been placed exactly where you are, not by accident, but for such a time as this. Thanks for watching.